Recording. And with that, let's get started. Now I present to you the director of the Nairobi Water Fund, Fred Kirahara, who will also be hosting our call for today. So thank you, Fred, for hosting, and over to you, Fred.
Thank you very much, Maria. Thank you very much, team. It's my pleasure this afternoon to join all of us as we have our first call of the year, and we start talking about maturity, which is probably the best way to start the year. I have one more announcement to make. It's a bit dated, but I would really like to make it because we're joined by a number of team members from Sierra Leone, and one of our newest waterfalls in the world is the waterfall around Freetown called Western Area Peninsula Waterfall. And one of our greatest leaders there is actually her worship, the mayor of Freetown, Mayor Yvonne. And I've received news, I don't know how many people have heard, that she's actually won the Global Mayor's Award with her initiative dubbed 1 Million Trees, Freetown becoming Tree Town. This is from Bloomberg Philanthropies, and I think it's worth something like $1 million. So I think I want to congratulate all the people of Freetown and Sierra Leone, and particularly the ones on this call. And we'll get an opportunity to say what we say, hogera, to the mayor. Other than that, we're going to keep this short. Maria, just keep an eye. A few people got a little bit of frustration who are joining because they went to connect, to get registered, and there was a challenge there. And I may have been one of them. So I know it well. So, but just keep an eye. I see our members are joining in, and we hope as much as possible to see people in this call. We're going to discuss this from 3 August. We're going to listen to Africa First because they put their waterfall on steroids. Just the other day, we talked about it being launched way back in 2015. And today I'm joined by Emmanuel to talk about that. And then after that, I'll have Hugo Contreras and I'll have Doug talk about the same concept, both in Latin America and in the United States. Both Hugo and Doug are long-term founder members of this network. They are very well accomplished in their own areas. And in the invitation, you see a summary of their bios, and you can see about what they've been doing and what they've been up to. I'll take a moment as I welcome Emmanuel to just introduce him and let you know that Emmanuel Lulema is a man also of many accomplishments. We all know the Global Pentea, and Emmanuel worked for Pentea for many years, and particularly for the branch of Pentea in Netherlands called Halfmans, where he was the commercial director before being appointed in 2018 to be the Africa director. For the first time, Pentea appointed a director for Africa. Emmanuel came in, and within time, he loved the Nairobi Waterford, and he was invited, and since then, he's been a trustee of Nairobi Waterford representing Pentea. In 2019, he became the chairperson of the board of trustees, and he's led it up to sometime last year when he stepped aside as the chairperson to take up interim executive directorship as it was maturing to make sure that it's put in the right footage. Today, Emmanuel joins us, not from Pentea, but him and his own colleagues have started their own outfit, AHPS, doing the same business around the continent, and he's a private sector entrepreneur in the country. And please join me in welcoming Emmanuel. For the next 20 minutes, we want to listen to Emmanuel, and then 15 minutes to Hugo, and another 15 minutes to Doug. After that, we'll have a session for Q&A. Welcome, Emmanuel. Thank you.
Thank you, Fred. Thank you for the nice introduction, and good evening, good afternoon, and good morning, wherever you are. I know people are from different parts of the globe, and I want to start thanking the Nature Conservancy for first being a promoter for the water funds, and also being the platform for us to organize such a webinar. And I want to thank Cristina de la Paz for coordinating this event we're having today. And I do hope that as we go forward, existing water funds and the new upcoming water fund can benefit from such webinars. As I first said, my name is Emmanuel Rema. I'm one of the lead of the Upper Tana Nairobi Water Fund Trust. It is an honor for me and a pleasure to be with you and to share with you our journey from when the Upper Tana Nairobi Water Fund was conceived to the present day, when it is fully independent trust organization, carrying on with its mandate of 3 C's. The C we talk about are conservation, clean water, and the community benefits. To this mandate, I will come back on this later. For those who don't know, maybe much about Nairobi, it is the capital city of Kenya, a 224,000 square miles coastal country in the Eastern Africa, with a population of 47.6 million as per 2019 census. So the name Kenya comes from the famous mountain, Mount Kenya, which originates from the Kikuyu people who used to call the mountain Kirinyaga, meaning the mountain of whiteness, because it's then snow-capped peak, which sometimes nowadays we can't see anymore. The name Nairobi comes from the Maasai phrase, Enkare Nairobi, which translates to cool water. Nairobi used to be a water place. It was essentially an uninhabited swamp until supply depot of the Uganda Railway, which was built by the British in 1899, linking the coast of Mombasa to Uganda. So you can understand that Mount Kenya was giving water to the country, and Nairobi was actually the reservoir. Anyway, I leave the history at this point. Let's focus on the water fund. If you allow me to present Cristina, there is a presentation I have prepared, which I want to share with the people present today.
Yes, Emmanuel, can you ask for permission to share the screen, please?
Yes, if you can make me the host so that I can share my screen.
Okay.
Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Very good. So the Tana River is the longest river in Kenya, with its circa 1,000-kilometer stream and its catchment covering roughly 100,000 square kilometers. And the river originates from the Aberdare Mountains and it flows all the way into the Indian Ocean, creating an essential habitat and nurturing important ecosystems along its entire length. A few examples of the benefit of this river. The Tana River sustains the Tana Delta Ramsar sites, a wetland of recognized international importance. Our conservation work will help ensure cleaner and more abundant water heads downstream, and that the ecological integrity of the delta will endure for generations to come. The Aberdare Range and a national park is home to some of the most rare endemic species, including the Africa indigenous black rhinos, endangered mountain bongo antelopes, leopards, and some monkeys. The water fund will provide conservation benefits to the Mount Kenya National Park and the Forest Reserve area, a UNESCO World Heritage Site. The adjacent lands have an important spiritual importance for the indigenous community who live there. And the Tana River supplies also 95% of the water for 9 million people, from which 4 million lives in Nairobi and other 5 million living in the watershed. The same river also contributes to 65% of a country's hydropower, which account for almost half of the country electrical production. But the river is being choked with the sediments, filling up the reservoirs, reducing hydropower output, and putting the economic growth at risk. Where is this coming from? We face many challenges in our water sources, from fast degradation of the forest and national park to farming activities in very steep lands. So farmers on steep lands have cut down forest trees so that they can have land for cultivating the crops. However, the rain have been washing the soils of the farmers' land. The river sediments therefore increase and affecting both the quality and quantity of river water, reaching the dams for the electricity production and the towns of Nairobi for water consumption. Because of soil degradation, farmers lost income, and more importantly, the source of their income, the soil. A lot of work was needed to remedy this. Water funds were cut for this. Please allow me to share with you a small clip which gives you a little bit more insight into the water fund before we go much more deeper into the presentation.
Touching the soil, I feel like I'm touching life.
There's a delicate balance between soil and water for the 300,000 small-scale farmers growing coffee, tea, and bananas.
Excuse me, can you see the video all?
Yes, we can see it and hear it.
And a river watershed. For decades, forests on steep hillsides have been slowly converted to agriculture. Reduced soil productivity from erosion and competition for space have forced farmers onto steeper and steeper slopes. Now, during the rainy season, soil is quickly washed into the Tana River, reducing the productivity of farmland and clogging water distribution and power generation facilities with sediment. But these issues don't remain in the watershed. The Tana River supplies drinking water to more than 9 million people, including 4 million people downstream in the capital city of Nairobi. With an unreliable water supply, many people are forced to buy jerry cans of water just to have enough to drink, cook, and wash. Security will only become more challenging as climate change brings increasingly unpredictable rainfall and the city's population continues to climb. That's why the Nature Conservancy is bringing diverse partners together to solve these challenges through the Upper Tana Nairobi Water Fund. Water funds are founded on the principle that it's cheaper to prevent problems at the source than it is to address them further downstream. Urban water users invest in upstream watershed conservation for the benefit of farmers, businesses, and Kenyans throughout the region. In the Upper Tana watershed, the Nature Conservancy and its partners are working with more than 25,000 farmers and are on course to reach 50,000 farmers by 2022. We are providing the skills, training, and resources they need to conserve water, reduce soil runoff, and improve productivity. The goal is to improve livelihoods, conserve habitat, and have more water flowing into Nairobi each day. Jade Kabugi, for instance, has learned how to dig trenches and plant napier grass to prevent soil runoff on a steep hillside farm. Stanley Kamenju has installed a system to collect and store rainwater for irrigation. Now he can grow and sell vegetables in the dry season when he can fetch a higher price.
You can say now we are food secure using the water pumps given to us by KNC. So we are very grateful that we are very stable farmers now. Our lives have been transformed.
While the Nairobi Water Fund is the first of its kind in Africa, it builds on the expertise Nature Conservancy scientists have gained from designing more than 40 water funds around the world. The Upper Tana Nairobi Water Fund can now serve as a model to leaders across the continent as they look for solutions to growing challenges such as water scarcity, population growth, and climate change. By investing in and protecting our sources of water, we can make a lasting difference for people and nature in Kenya and across Africa.
Very good. Christian, maybe you can make me host again so I go back to the PowerPoint presentation.
Emmanuel, it looks like you
Okay.
are a co-host.
You're good to go.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Okay, now this problem I talked about, where do they come from? Again, it comes from farms like Jane Kabuki's, you just saw in the movie. High in the hills, upriver of Nairobi. Jane is a retired secretary who farms a small plot of land next to her home. She's one of more than 15,000 farmers we're working with to take simple steps to keep soil on the farm and out of the river. Since 1970s, this huge expansion of farming has led to a loss of ground cover and bare slopes with the highly vulnerable soil.
Emmanuel, are you, sorry to interrupt, are you meant to be sharing your screen right now?
Yes, 1 second. Let me see. Right, can you see it now?
Yes.
Yep, that's perfect.
Sorry for that. Yes, since 1970, the expansion of farming has led to a loss of ground cover and bare slopes with a highly vulnerable soil. Now, during the rainy season, massive amounts of sediments are washed into the river. Nairobi water treatment and distribution facilities become choked with the sediment, often causing water service in Nairobi to come to a complete halt. There are 300,000 very small farms on steep slopes in the Upper Tana watershed. In fact, 98% of the people who live there are farmers who grow tea, coffee, bananas, and other crops. Land scarcity in a watershed crowded by thousands of smallholder farmers and declines in the soil productivity due to erosion drives farmers to expand cultivation into steeper and steeper slopes and riparian catchments. Working with these farmers for us, starting with 50,000 in the steepest and most critical areas, is imperative to reduce the many impacts that are caused by deforestation and this massive sediment runoff. This impact includes water treatment costs increased by more than 33 as the sediment runoff fill and disrupt equipment during the wet season. For example, the annual water treatment and filtration costs at Coca-Cola site in Nairobi were over $1 million, significantly impacting production costs and the company bottom line. Loss of natural wetlands that once stored runoff water and recharge aquifers has reduced dry season flows. Reservoirs lose active storage capacity as they fill with the sediments, limiting therefore ability of hydropower producer to balance production across seasons. So we are told that during the 2009 drought in Kenya, KenGen, the Kenya Electricity Generation Company, sales dropped by 12% from the previous year, and that was worth $19.8 million. New agricultural land have increased demand for irrigation water, competing with the water needs of the city that is already at a 30% deficit. And ladies and gentlemen, Nairobi population has doubled in the last 25 years, and it will continue to steadily rise. So this population growing, and we need an ever-increasing supply of food, water, and electricity from the Upper Tana River basin. Sorry, I have to admit a few people have been knocking at the door. Now, what we decide to set a strategy to tackle this problem. So our strategy, our work in the Tana River watershed is focused on restoring nature, transforming how the river and the watershed are used, and inspiring more people to become ambassadors. Like Jane, you just saw at the community level, all the way up to national government and global corporation working locally in Kenya. So we are working with the Green Belt Movement, Nobel Prize winner Wangari Maathai's organization, to restore and reforest where possible. We are planting native tree species in higher altitude area of the watershed that have been cleared for agriculture but are not currently productive farmland. We are planting buffer zones of native plant species along rivers and streams in order to slow the conveyance of runoff. and farmers who receive resources and support from the Nature Conservancy. We go on to educate, assist, and mentor other local farmers on how to implement the improved conservation practices. And we're also mobilizing influential leaders in the public and private sector because we need those people to be the guiding and the driving force in this involvement. So as you can see, our strategy was to get the public, private sector to work together with the local community in order to solve the problem we're facing in the catchment area. Now, on the next slide, I wanted to go now a little bit on historical how we started. The Nature Conservancy, being one of the most effective and wide-reaching environmental organizations in the world, with a mission to conserve the lands and waters on which all life depends, realized that something had to be done, and then they took initiative to invite some public and private sector players to join hands and they start the Upper Tana Nairobi Water Fund together with the local community in the catchment area. Before the water fund was officially set up, first we ensure that we have the key steps to ensure that we embark on the water fund path with the full conviction that we do the right things, which work for the community. The first thing was to convene a few stakeholders. So we've taken key stakeholders to Mexico to learn how the water fund there works. And we got also some support from Latin America in the capacity building. We worked out a scientific model, which was developed together with the university to study the returns on the investment. And also we look into other pilots and proof of concept which have been established. And finally, we grouped a team of strong volunteering leaders here in Kenya who have exemplary credentials and passion for conservation. And once that was done, we also worked out a case study, which was covering a period of 10 years from 2015 to 2025 to see what you want to do with water fund, what to be the return. So the case study has shown that we have a 2-on-1 return investment, which means for $1 invested, there will be at least $2 as a return as a harvested benefit. So once this science-based approach was done and we've got confidence that what you want to do will definitely work, so we started the real work. So in the work what we've done, we said the first approach, we want to follow 2-level approach. One is to do the water fund as a kind of social enterprise. So we have to have a mindset of doing business. And the second element was ownership, so that the partner we work with, they have a sense of owning what they're doing, not just for the sake of doing conservation. So in our business approach, first, we're working on incentivizing every landowner so that they can see it's not about just planting a tree, they need to get a sort of benefit from themselves. For example, we have been encouraging the farmers to plant a tree to hold the soil, but also to plant some fruit tree, which are increasing the income. So we worked on providing skills and material, a model for the payment for ecosystems, and we got also some government staff in the local regional county to help us to keep the cost low. And we're working at planning at scale. And also because we are working with a very large number of people, we've set up a system with local telecommunication provider, an SMS platform, through which we are able to reach all the 44,000 farmers at the same time. So right now we are able to send a message and it reaches the 44,000 farmers at the same time. And the farmers want to give us feedback like the rain level, the crop health. They're able to give feedback to us so that our monitoring and evaluation officer can work with those data and give us insights, information about the situation on the farm, and we can make a decision. And then on ownership side, we had approached that there is a 50% contribution from the government, but also 50% from the business. And also we were thinking of having something forever. So we made this concept as a perpetual charitable trust. So I'm going to come back on this later and talk about the financing model. Now, as you can see, Upper Tana Water Fund, we are just one of the 43 existing water funds across the 13 countries where water fund have been created. And I personally believe that the individual water fund success and strength will come from our collaborative experience. Therefore, sharing experience and learning from each other will contribute to either improving those water funds already existing or accelerating the setup of the new water fund to come. Tuko pamoja, as we say in Swahili, which means we are together. Now, on this slide, I want to share with you a little bit about the events. So as I mentioned, we started in 2015, where the Water Fund was established as a vehicle for protecting the Tana River catchment. And at that moment when we did the business case covering 10 years, we saw that the business case was actually emphasized that we need to build a green infrastructure upstream of great infrastructure in order to safeguard the water supply in downstream, but also uplift the situation of the farmer who are for us partners. And in 2016, the government of Kenya declared the water fund as a national priority, and through the injection of 8 million of public funds to match 4 million of local contribution. And 2 days later, the President of the Republic of Kenya has made the directive that all government agencies to include the budget item for source water protection as part of all the projects. So with this, we got a very strong support from the government, and it became a national agenda. And having water fund as the driving tool for the country of Kenya to do this was also inspiring for the partners. So and then we can see that by 2020, the water fund really has become a reliable clean water source, and we are promoting sanitation and hygiene and safety. And then finally, in 2021, the project was established in 2015. Transited into an independent trust, which is now, since the 1st of September, is running independently from TNC. Now, on the next slide, which I want to show you a few elements which are including what we've set for us as goals and the strategy to follow, because the main program was to trigger large-scale landscape transformation in the catchment area. And for this, we had the 3 clear goals. The one I stated at the beginning of it. Number was to conserve the nature. Number 2 was to provide clean water. And number 3, and more important for us, is to ensure the community get the benefit. And the strategy followed was to fix forests while we are fixing the farms of our partner, the local farmers. And in this, we have an objective, because we have set up a 5-year strategic plan to plant 5 million trees. By 2021, we have planted already 3.4 million. We are planning to expand the riparian buffer zone with the Napier grass, and they also created terraces in steep area. And so far, we've done this at 44,000 farms. And we also, in our plan, we have a plan to plant high-value trees, like avocado for a farmer who get extra income from that, while the tree also helping them to keep the soil on the farm. And so far, we've planted 1.2 million of avocado trees. And in order to help the farmer to still continue with the farming, even in a dry season, we have implemented a program of putting water pans on the farms, and so far we have installed more than 15,000. So a detail you're going to see later. So this in summary, what were the strategy and the objectives, and in alignment of 5-year strategic plan, which is running from 2022 and 2026 as revised. Now, the next slide is giving a little bit more a deep dive in those metrics of achievement we've done so far. As you are today, we have conserved 44,787 farms, from which 37 belong to women. I think it's very important in Africa context and a family setup to understand that a family run by women or women actually the backbone of the African economy, African society. Therefore, we are very proud to see that 38% of the farm we have conserved are run by women. And then we have planted, as I mentioned earlier, 3.4 million tree seedlings, including 1.2 million of fruits for food income for farmers. And this translates in about $50 million per year as direct revenue for those farmers. And we have installed, to be exact, 15,283 water pans, which help the farmer to harvest rainwater, and they can still continue to do farming even the dry season. We have made 300 kilometers of riparian land conserved. We have created 1,500 kilometers of terraces and grass strips. And so far, we have worked on 90,000 acres of farmland under improved soil and water management program. And where we are today, when we look also in the river flowing down to Nairobi, the river quality has improved. So the sediment has been reduced and quality has been improved by 15%, which is translating automatically also into benefit for hydro electricity producer and also the Nairobi Water and the Sewage Company.
1 more minute, Emmanuel.
Yes, I'm rushing to the end. So as I just mentioned, the water in the river flowing to Nairobi has been improved. You can see that on the upper graph, we're showing the increase in the quantity. The lower graph is showing the decline in the chemical used to treat the water, which was a direct benefit for our private sector partners. Now we are moving into the maturity. Water Fund since 1st September is independent. What does it mean? So what we did first was to have a transition committee established Nature Conservancy and the Trust to manage this transition. With the 1 year as a transition period, we had a specific budget to cover the cost in that area. We develop a term of reference for new hires, develop tools such as operation manuals, on the logo. We have a bank account set up. We have a communication tools in place, such as emails. We have a template for the letters. And also we have an annual plan and a 5-year strategic plan based on which the current trust team is operating. And also one of our leaders, which is at the Waterworks, has promised us to give us a new office. So we do expect that by end of the first quarter, we have also our physical offices and to run as independent organization. So as you can see, the system is in place, the governance and the system is in place with the fiduciary mandate. You are free to come to our website and visit what we are doing, and we have enough information for you to understand the journey we went through and where we are, and also our objectives. The website is www.nairobiwaterfund.org. And at the end, I want to thank you for giving me your 20 minutes time to listen to our journey. And asante sana, merci, obrigado, gracias, shukran, danke schön, and thank you well. Back to you, Christina.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Emmanuel. And that's quite some good information. I would like to confirm that we'll be sharing the slides. They'll be available. So if there's some details you did not get, they'll be there together with the notes. But thank you very much, Emmanuel. And you can see Emmanuel's passion, having been a founder, trustee, and having been chairman of the board of trustees, and now an interim executive director, Jiras regarding that the water fund is successfully implemented. I know I had in the program 5 minutes, but I'll make them only 2. Emmanuel, okay, he's dropped his sharing, so I'll bring up my screen, but I want to have one slide. But what I want to share here is that we have a number of resources that Emmanuel talked about. We have the tools that the Waterford Trust has used. And these tools are now available. We're working with the Waterford Toolbox, all these facilities, all these manuals, so that as our minimum waterfalls get to maturity, you don't have to all the time crack your minds about a human resource manual, a financial management manual, fundraising strategy, grant making strategy, etc. But all these resources have graciously been donated by the trustees of Nairobi Water Fund and will be shareable. They're already available, so if you're looking for any, please reach out either to Emmanuel or to myself and we can get that. But I wanted to use my minute to, on top of that, to celebrate that many of the people on this call helped us establish Nairobi Water Fund as the first water fund in the continent. And now we look back and it's our journey from 1 to 15. We're now getting to 15 sites across the African continent. One major difference is the demand. There's overwhelming demand of how can we do this, because there are many geographies, there are many urban centers, there are many watersheds that will do with a water fund model for their resilience. We're doing the best we can, but we're proud that we managed to reach to 15 sites and we're working. But if you look at this slide, there are many geographies that the Nature Conservancy does not even have presence. And I want to give credit to our partners. That just by providing skills and people being able to use the resources in the water fund toolbox, there has been a lot of initiation of water funds in areas like Cebu in Morocco, where WWF is actually almost working on their own. We can hardly get them much support from Nairobi, and they're still there and they're doing a fantastic job. Dakar, Senegal, where we are going to have the 9th World Water Forum in March. We might have a chance actually to drive out of town and see some of the sites that they're planning to work on as a water fund there. Catholic Reef Service is heading. So what we've seen in Africa, just because of that big demand, is other partners stepping forward. We have governments. I didn't mention Freetown in Sierra Leone, but the government of Sierra Leone has developed a cabinet paper to discuss their water fund in cabinet and ensure that their national treasury can allocate money to the water fund for its implementation to ensure success. There are many other such examples. We're seeing municipalities stepping in. The most athletic city in the world is probably Eldoret in East Africa. And the municipality of Eldoret and the water utility company are leading in establishing a water fund in Eldoret. Same thing with other places. I'll put up this map, and again, we'll share this. And this shows every site. At the bottom, at the top is what have we been able to achieve? Feasibility, design, business case, are we into implementation or not? All that you can see from this map. But more importantly is you get the name and you see the lead partners. And it is a pleasant surprise that in many of the sites already, even with a nascent program, the leadership is not in the house of TNC. We're just a technical partner and a collaborator. But our local partners are learning away with it, and I welcome many of those who are in this call and many others we are working with, from Catholic Reef Services, Water for People, WWIF, and many others, and also our local partners who are also working with us. And for example, CIWI and WRI and many other organizations that you all know. So I just want to say that that's one of the things that we've learned from Nairobi to the continent, is the leadership role for our other partners. In the interest of time, and with that promise that we will share these maps, I would like now to cycle on to the next presenter for today. This is no other than Hugo Contreras, our Water Security Managing Director for Latin America. Hugo, this is your chance. If you'd like to take the screen away, I'm bringing mine down. Welcome, Hugo.
Hello, Fred. Thank you very much and welcome every one of you. This is an amazing story, the one that we're hearing from Africa. And what I want to do now is I want to share some of the thoughts and ideas that we've been putting forward in Latin America to think what a consolidated or mature waterfront would look like. I have to say that in our history, which spans for more than 20 years working with waterfronts and being really sincere, we've only have to put it this way, if we were to comply with all the characteristics that we think are necessary for a mature waterfront, we would only have one which is the Quito Water Fund, which has been working for many years. But as you will see, we have divided the characteristics or the necessary conditions that we believe water fund must have to be consolidated and mature in different elements. And many of the water funds comply 1, 2, 3, or 4 of those elements. And I would say they are moving targets, which as water funds achieve them or arrive at those conditions, they keep moving the bar a bit further away. So let me share my screen now, and I'm going to just share, and let me know if you can see my screen now.
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you very much. So just a bit of history. In Latin America, we've created 26 water funds, and at least 8 more are in development at different stages of development. And more or less in the lines of Fred, we have aligned more than 300 local partners all across the region with some results which have been accumulated over the years. If we look at the history, and I would say this is important, looking at the history and thinking about the maturity of the water funds, we started in 2000 working with the first water fund in Quito. And from there, we started moving. It took quite a bit of time for the Quito Water Fund to get off the ground, maybe 5 to 6 years. Then we started the creation of water funds in Brazil. Then we expanded in Ecuador, Colombia, Peru, etc. But while we were creating water funds, we also thought that it was important to create a platform that could support these water funds back then. So in 2011, the Nature Conservancy created an agreement with the Inter-American Development Bank, the FEMSA Foundation, and supported by the Global Environmental Facility, and more recently by the International Climate Initiative of the German government. This agreement had the intention of promoting, creating, and strengthening water funds all across the region, as if it was a facility of resources, or more than resources, capabilities that would be provided to the different interested parties in the different countries, so we could start creating water funds or accelerating the creation of water funds. This is what we call the Latin American Water Funds Partnership. And across the many years that we've been working with this partnership, we've also brought together water funds from different countries and different continents. In 2019, we had the fortune of having our 4th Water Fund Summit in Mexico City, and the Nairobi Water Fund was present, and I think it was a milestone for them to be able to attend that. And but all I want to say with this history is that we've been learning, and one of the important lessons that we've learned is water funds have to adapt to their local conditions. They respond, even though they have imprinted the DNA of nature-based solutions, of collective action, of trying to fill in the policy and regulatory gaps that you're finding in every one of the countries or the regions where the water funds operate. The important thing is that there is a context, a legal, institutional, political, and economic context in every one of the countries, which in a way shapes how the water fund is being created. An important thing that we've done in Latin America, for whatever reason, is ever since we start every water fund, they grow independent. They are independent entities. So to speak, we've become an incubator of NGOs, which are called water funds across the region. And we've developed a theory of change, very simple theory of change for every water fund. And when a water fund is created, the first thing it strives for is credibility. it has to become a credible partner. It has to become a credible actor within the governance and within the stakeholders that are working in water security or water management. With that credibility, they will start influencing some decisions, and increasingly more and more, they will have a part in the decision-making process. And by doing so, by gaining credibility and then positioning themselves, they will have the impact. And I will just just mention something that we believe it's very important. Water funds can, along the history of the water funds in Latin America, we've seen at least two different extremes of water funds, or water funds which are located at two extremes. One is the water fund that's an implementing agency of a program, either government, utility, or private sector program, that it's responsible for executing the work being done on the ground. And that's a water fund like Quito, who receives the stream of or part of the water tariffs that are collected every month by the water utility in Quito, that are invested in source water management through the water fund. And that's the same case of many of the water funds in Brazil. On the other extreme, you have water funds to change policy and to work with other authorities and other entities. And those entities are the ones responsible for executing the work, while the water fund becomes I would say, a guardian of a larger mission, of a larger strategic plan, and its work is to provide science, to provide technical assistance to those implementing on the ground. And as you can see, this how they decide to become and what entity and what strategy they decide to follow, in a way determines the amount of resources and the financial sustainability model that they will have. And so, sorry. And as you can, as you know, we've created a project cycle that has 5 stages, from feasibility, where you're asking yourself the basic question of, is a water fund an adequate instrument, or is the situation adequate for a water fund to be a solution? Once you say yes, then you move to design, and design is all the strategic planning, which is deciding what the water fund is going to be, what the objective is going to be, what is the business model, what is the role it's going to play in water management or in water security, and what are the resources necessary to fulfill this mission or to fulfill this strategic view. In parallel, we work in creating the legal vehicle or the entity that's going to host the water fund and that's going to be responsible for operating the water fund. And once it is created, it can then move into full operation. And that full operation means rather than thinking what is the business model, it has to think how every year and every cycle it has to deliver on the results. And finally, consolidation is when it reaches some of these elements. And I will concentrate on these 2 phases, which is the operation of the fund, which are the characteristics that we consider for a water fund to be mature. So the first thing is, there are 5 groups of elements that we think in Latin America that a water fund should comply with in order to be mature or consolidated. The first one is to have a clear strategic vision with the planning and all the procedures in place. What does this mean? Is that the water fund, what it means is that the water fund has a clear guidance that support its day-to-day operations, and that clearly tells all the members, all the stakeholders of the water fund, what the water fund is doing, where is it going, what is it going to achieve in the long term, and what it needs to achieve the objectives that is set to achieve. So it has at least 3 elements: a strategic plan, which is updated, as the Nairobi Water Fund just mentioned, they are setting a 5-year strategic plan, and that is something that is necessary if you want to have a long-term vision, at least a medium-term vision, with smart objectives and implementation and a financial plan to support this operation. Secondly, and also mentioned in the Nairobi Water Fund, you need the policies and procedures. All organizations, in order to be mature, they have to have internal regulations, internal operational manuals that are a guide for their day-to-day operations, and they need to ensure transparency. And why is that important? Because as an NGO, and remember, we are creating in most cases NGOs, one of the strategic elements of an NGO is to be transparent, is to ensure that everyone believes what they're saying, believes that the resources that are invested are being invested in the best possible way. And the third thing it has to achieve is track record. The better or the longer track record it can achieve, then the more trustworthy this organization is going to be, and then it inserts into a virtuous circle of trust, support, strengthening, trust, support, strengthening, etc. So this is the first group of elements. The second group of elements is implementation. And implementation, it's the track record, but it's also the capabilities that the Water Fund is building to implement, either building capabilities directly. And the Quito Water Fund, for example, has at least 60 staff because it's responsible for the conservation and the guarding of the local parks. That's why it has a numerous group of people, but really the number has to be aligned with the strategy, the capabilities and the staff and how it is distributed inside the Water Fund. It has to be aligned with the strategy, but importantly, it has to show good performance. If it shows good performance, again, it enters into a virtuous circle of trustworthiness, support, strengthening, delivering results, and then that allows this institution to grow. There is no hidden secret. The better or the better performing this organization is, the more resources it's going to attract, and the more impact it's going to produce. And it also has to have the capabilities. Most water funds are really young organizations, and they are creating a track record of attracting talent to their operations. Initially, it's a one-man show. Fred Quijada was a one-man show for a long time, running all around. But and this is the story of many of the water funds. It's a one-man or a one-woman show for some time, supported by their board. But then it creates a capability. It has to be a professional organization. Third group of elements, it's measuring and reporting. Over the long run, a water fund has to deliver impact, and more importantly, it has to show that it's delivered impact. And at least there are 3 lines of reporting that it has to comply with. The first is the financial reporting. Of course, what is the water fund doing with the resources that's getting? And it has to do with standardized financial reports, audited financial reports better. So it again creates transparency and trust. Second is a technical report. That the technical report is, it just answers the question if the activities that are being set forth in the strategic plan are being implemented. And the third line of reporting has to be impact. And I'm glad to see that the Water Fund in Nairobi is, for example, reporting river flow, and that's amazing. But one of the big gaps that we're seeing in many of the water funds is that measuring impact is costly. It requires infrastructure that in many cases it does not exist. And if it exists, accessing to that infrastructure, gathering data, it requires time, it requires capacities, it requires technical capacity and resources. And we've seen that many water funds are very focused on implementing their activities, on getting resources to create more hectares. but when they go out and ask for resources to establish the necessary infrastructure to gather the data, then they're finding trouble. So how to solve that, I have no idea. Water funds have to do that, but we need to start reporting impact. And I think as we can access satellite information and remote sensing, I think the cost of monitoring will reduce, and we will be able to produce fairly solid impact reporting into the future at low cost. The fourth group is sustainable funding. And what do we mean by sustainable funding? At least two lines of thinking. The first is operational sustainability. A water fund director has to think at every beginning of the year that a significant proportion of the resources that needs to operate the fund to pay for salaries, to pay for operational costs, and to deliver at least a minimum set of activities, it's secured. If you start out day one of the year with $0 in your bank account, you're in trouble. So first thing is you need to be able to achieve operational sustainability. And we're setting some numbers, and these numbers are a guiding principle, but at least 70% of annual operational cost being secured from sustainable funding sources at the beginning of the year. That means endowments, either another option is tariffs being allocated or resources being allocated by a public entity, or long-term commitments by members of the water fund. As we know, water funds, at least in Latin America, they are developing hybrid business models where they are collecting memberships, they are building an endowment, and at the same time, they are providing services either to their members or to other entities that are seeing the water funds as a good platform for investing their environmental and social sustainability and governance resources through these entities. And the second line of thinking over the long run is impact sustainability. And that means having resources, at least a significant portion of the resources to achieve their goals, their long-term goals, secure. This is where most of the water funds are struggling. Quito Water Fund gets 2% of water tariffs every year, and that has allowed them to build an endowment of over $20 million or around $20 million, which on the one hand secures operations, but at the same time, it allows them to invest resources in their big mission. There are very few water funds have resources to think that their long-term investment plan is going to be financially satisfied. And finally, the fifth group of elements that we need to consider is governance and influence. And that is how the water fund, or it's conceived, is perceived in the water management around the region. And there are four elements that we think. First, the legal status. It has to have a legal status according to the context where it operates. It can be an independent entity. It can be a government body. It can be a public-private partnership. It doesn't really matter. It's just the question is, what is the legal status that will allow the water fund to play the best role it can play in influencing decision-making, the decisions. Technical
minute, Hugo.
Yeah, technical capabilities. It has one of the strong elements or differentiators of a water fund. Its ability to provide solid technical recommendations to the partners that will enhance credibility. Third is recognition. The water fund has to be recognized as an entity that it's part of the water governance. And finally, a solid governance, a solid internal governance with an operating board, committed, diverse, stable, and with continuity. I will not go into the examples, but there is a list of examples that I think have done very well in every one of the elements. And we can talk a bit more if there is time about these examples. And thank you very much for the time. And I hope this has been useful.
Very, very useful, Hugo. And thank you very much for that. And we will have a question and answer session, and you might be able to throw in some of the good examples so that people can know who to run to for support. Without much ado, I'll move on to Doug. Doug, we've eaten a little bit of your time, but we hope we're still going to get you enough time. And then after that, I will continue to welcome questions on chat. So Doug, over to you.
Thank you. I hopefully will take a little less time, so we can have plenty of time for questions and discussion at the end. So good morning from St. Paul, Minnesota in the United States. It's cold and snowy here. I'm sitting in my home here, not far from the confluence of the Mississippi and Minnesota rivers, which is the traditional heart of the traditional homeland of the Dakota people. It's a good afternoon and good evening to the rest of you, wherever you may be in the world. So well, I'm enjoying this. Congratulations to the Emmanuel and the whole Nairobi Upper Tano team for achieving this independent trust status. And Hugo, thank you for that presentation. I'm thinking about what I'm about to say in light of those criteria. It's really, really interesting to see always see the work, good work that's going on in the Latin American region. So I'm going to share my screen here, and hopefully I've got two screens, so I'm going to have to flip them around a little bit, which usually, let's see. All right. All right, are you seeing, let's see here. Go into this. All right, are you seeing my notes or my my slides? All right.
We're watching
We'll
both slides.
Your notes. Yes,
okay. One second. And I'm not seeing the usual button to switch it over. So if you'll just bear with it, I'll just work from the so you'll see my next slide in each case. But again, I'm representing sort of the collection of North America Waterfund Resilient Watershed projects.
Doug,
yeah.
maybe you could try from the next one, the display setting, to see if you can get to.
Yeah.
I mean, on the text bar on top, the display setting, the second one. After your taskbar, then the next one is display settings. I don't know whether it comes your side.
That usually is showing, but it's not actually showing for me today. That's
okay.
It seems like Zoom is different every time of the thousands of times I've now used it. So apologies for that. But
keep going.
My slide will be a little smaller, and you can see the next one coming up. So again, I'm Doug Shaw. I'm representing part-time sort of the point of contact for North America Resilient Watershed projects. Have been in this role for about a year and hope to continue on here for the next year or so. In my day job, so to speak, I'm the assistant director of the Minnesota, North Dakota, South Dakota chapter of the Minnesota within the United States. So just my map, sort of equivalent to what Hugo showed here, just to kind of orient you a little bit. I think some of us still think of North America as the new frontier for water funds and resilient watershed projects. But I wanted to kind of let you know a little bit about the breadth of projects, a little bit in reference to kind of the time scale evolution that Hugo mentioned for water funds. So there are about 20 projects that we track within North America, each of them a little more decentralized perhaps than in the Latin American region. Each of them really owned by local partnerships, sometimes with the Nature Conservancy involvement. In fact, that's probably the majority of the cases at present. The Nature Conservancy is involved, but some have developed independently on their own. And some of them, I'm gonna talk about a subset of them that we consider mature at this point. And in fact, as I thought through, Hugo's criteria are actually meeting some, if not all, of those maturity criteria that he laid out. But just know that of these 20, there are we're learning lessons to be learned from all 20, regardless of the stage that they're in. Many are making significant contributions, and some are actually created from the very beginning, as is the case in a lot of Latin America, as independent entities. So some are actually developing some collective experience that's critical for some others that are moving into this maturity phase. So just the color coding there, and just a reminder also that the North American region includes projects in the Caribbean. We have some overlap in sort of coordination and participation there with the Latin American region in the Caribbean, but there's 2 projects in the Dominican Republic. I think I saw Francisco here attending today, and 1 sort of startup project in Jamaica. The color coding here is the orange or red dots are those projects that are in operating or mature stages, and then the blue or violet color there are those that are, I call, still pre-startups, or just starting, maybe pre-launch, working through a lot of the feasibility and things that are necessary to get to design and start up. So you can also see that they sort of span the North American geography from east to west and north to south. Just based on a quick sort of survey that I helped do back in 2020, so of those 20 active projects, 15 of them, so the majority, 3/4 of them, are in that operating phase, and about half of those, so 7 or 8, depending on how you define a project, have been underway for 5 years or more. And that's the sort of rough criteria that we're using to sort of separate those that are either at maturity or nearing maturity from those that are still really developing that credibility, developing the impact, still building both their impact and their financial investment that Hugo talked about. So all of these mature projects that are sort of, say, operating for underway for 5 years or more I'm taking a little bit different perspective with this than Hugo and others have, rather than sort of looking at the criteria for reaching maturity and reaching that level of impact, which I'm really intrigued by. This is more based on sort of the different kinds of experiences and the different challenges faced by these more longer running mature projects. And it has to do with change. And there's lots of change, in our daily lives and our professional lives. But nearly all of these mature projects are thinking about what I call the next phase, whether that is that transition to complete ownership by local partners. With that, some of them where the Nature Conservancy has been one of the founders or been integrally involved, thinking about a change in the scope or the role of the Nature Conservancy along with that transition. Several are either in the midst of or have already started scaling up to larger watersheds, where if you think about the original Santa Fe, New Mexico watershed, which really, has largely reached its goals. And now we're working on a much larger, the Rio Grande Waterfront project, which is a really different kind of an entity. I'll say more in a minute about that. But scaling up to larger watersheds or replicating successful waterfronts in other places, new places. Nearly all of these projects are in some form or fashion in the midst of a process to reassess and rethink and refresh strategic goals, priorities. And nearly all, and this is one of the things that really had an impact on me, as I learned from talking to all of the leads and the teams for these projects, is nearly all of them are reassessing or shoring up the sustainability of funding. And that's one of the messages I wanted to provide here in a minute. So why 5 years? That seems a little bit arbitrary. Hugo was in the Latin American criteria looking at three years or so. And there's no magic to it. It's really a first cut for us to kind of think about in North America, those projects that are reaching maturity. And there's some basis in it here. As I believe Hugo pointed out, in the Latin American case, our typical strategic planning cycle in the US, whether you're a corporation, whether you're a municipal entity, whether you're the Nature Conservancy, is actually about 5 years. And with the change that happens, we've gone, in fact, in our strategic planning and thinking from longer time periods. I remember when I first started at the Nature Conservancy, my business unit was in the midst of a 10-year strategic plan. But the world changes and our conditions change faster than ever. And so 5 years is about a typical frame for strategic planning. Likewise, one of the things that everyone said to me, every one of our projects said to me, is that the people like Emmanuel and Fred and, can be the mayor of the municipality, a water utility director, a city manager, the executive director of the water fund entity itself. People are really important, and the people and leadership of those key people is important. And yet, in the United States, at least, people move from job to job. There's a lot of fluctuation in people's tenure, and the average tenure of any time spent in any professional position in the US is about a little over 4 years, so 4 or 5 years. Not to overemphasize the point, but in US municipalities, turnover of elected bodies, city managers occurs roughly on a 4-year cycle. Just to take one of many of the vehicles that are being used in the United States or North America for sustainable funding, that is municipal bonds, have a lifespan of anywhere from 3 to 10 years. And our corporate champions and funders attention span is about 5 years or less. And I don't mean that in a bad way, but many of our funders are really looking across a suite of many good projects and initiatives that they try to fund. And it's difficult to sustain funding from any one, whether it be corporate or other kind of funder, for more than 5 years. So it's really impressed on a lot of our projects the need to diversify funding sources. So these are the projects. These are I guess I've listed 7 here in North America that meet that very rough criteria. And again, as I thought through, as Hugo was talking, this list of these 7 projects and thinking about those maturity criteria, I'd say that the majority of these are meeting or close to meeting, the criteria that Hugo mentioned, from financial sustainability to capacity to impact and credibility. But all are, again, going through different sorts of thinking as to what that next phase looks like. I mentioned the Rio Grande and Santa Fe water funds, where the Rio Grande is really thinking sort of more at an umbrella level over a very, very large watershed, very large river basin, essentially the entire Rio Grande River basin within New Mexico, and really trying to be enablers and provide resources for multiple local partnerships to emerge to be able to do things similar to what was done with the Santa Fe Water Fund originally. Likewise, the project that I work on in the Mississippi headwaters here in Minnesota has become a very large umbrella project where we too are enabling and capacity building at local levels. And it started out as a Nature Conservancy only water fund. It's grown into, as we've sort of reached maturity, this different kind of entity that's more like the Rio Grande. Edwards Aquifer in Texas, sort of 2 separate programs for the Nature Conservancy in Austin and San Antonio, Texas, a long-running, very successful project that's interestingly starting to reach its original goals for protection. And that team is kind of thinking about, okay, what comes next? Are there other kinds of interventions and actions that we've never really focused on? So we've been focused very successfully on land protection in the recharge area of an aquifer that we now need to turn our attention to. And there's interesting sort of issues of, this is one of the projects that's been sustained by local bond initiatives for many years now. And there's interesting issues that you might consider sort of voter fatigue or political fatigue that, gosh, we funded year after year these bond elections to keep this great effort going. When is it the point that we've reached our goals and it's enough is enough? And that's a very real political question that's affecting sort of long-term sustainability of the funding sources there. Each of these projects have their own stories, but all of them have sort of this characteristic of what's the next phase for us and how do we efficiently get to that point. I'll mention one more here, and I think I saw Kim Jonik on the call here, so set me straight if I say this wrong. But one of the things I was really impressed by about the Salton Verde River Alliance in Arizona, another mature project that's been doing great work, sort of in the irrigation and water efficiency space for years now, is really taking a step back and thinking about, less about a water fund, and their name now is the Salton Verde River Alliance, and more about how do we really achieve long-term sustainability by becoming more relevant to our communities in our basin, more of a community asset. And that's taking us or taking that team into some areas that maybe they never expected to in the past. Things like housing stocks and
One more
equity
minute,
and
Doug.
access to water. Okay, no problem. So anyway, there's a whole range of experience here I could probably talk about, and I'm sure our project leads could talk about for quite a while. Just as a part of this survey, we identified needs for assistance. And I've highlighted, so this is the list, sort of combined list for all 20 of our projects in North America, but I've highlighted those that are the needs for those mature, operating for 5 years or more water fund projects. And you can see that they tend to be what I've just talked about. They tend to be, how do we make transitions? How do we reassess, reevaluate? And somewhat different than from the rest of the 20. And I'll just go into my last slides here. I think Emily, when she asked me to kind of say a little bit about what's less important for our maturing water funds in North America and what's most important in terms of challenges, needs, and assistance, particularly. The issues that are less important are kind of obviously some of those things that they've already passed in a way. They're long past the need for basic feasibility assessment design. Development of decision support tools was fairly low on the list, although I think there's still some interest there. Developing business cases usually are kind of over that hurdle by this point, as are design of financial mechanisms, and even making that case for nature-based solutions. But I'll put a caveat on that source, one that's political in nature, that needs to be re-upped, if you will, by voters periodically. Sometimes you do need to continually be making that case for nature-based solutions. And then finally, my last slide, we can kind of roll into discussion here. What are the most important issues for mature water funds in North America? And this is by no means a comprehensive list, but they're the things that really popped out from my interviews with these project teams. One is to point out, and I think Ugo alluded to this in Latin America as well, truly sustainable funding over long periods of time is elusive. I really congratulate the Apatana Nairobi team for what they've been able to achieve with really solid governance and mechanisms for ensuring that sustainability of funding. But it's difficult, and it's maybe better way of saying it than elusive is that it takes continuous effort to be able to diversify funding sources, to be able to sustain those sources over the long period of time, because of the change that occurs, because visions change, people change, key partners change, political climate changes. So many of these projects, I think I've already said this, are interested in sort of best models, best practices for how to transition to partners and what level of engagement is best for some of those founding partners like the Nature Conservancy to retain. best models to efficiently scale to large watersheds. I showed the Ashland, Oregon project in the list on the previous couple of slides ago. They're sort of reaching their goals in the original sort of basin that supplies Ashland, Oregon, and thinking about how do we do this same thing? How do we replicate that in other sub-basins within the larger Rogue River Basin? And that's interesting to think about when it has taken many years to get to where they are and have a successful water fund in Ashland, serving Ashland. Now to think about how to do that even more quickly and more efficiently across large basins. And then how to evaluate, to audit, and then adjust our water funds to changing goals and priorities in this big question, which we hope is answered in part through our strategic planning, but how much conservation is enough? And that's one, again, that a number of our mature projects are kind of facing. So I think I'll end with that, and thank you for listening, and thank you for the other really interesting presentations.
Thank you very much, Doug, and that's very helpful. Again, we would share the slides, and I think those last two slides, I think we should go over them again when you receive them, go through what to put, make really important, and what you probably can go do without and still be successful. There are a number of questions, and everybody is giving lots of compliments to my presenters. So that's in the chat. Thank you very much, all of you. I wanted to see if it's possible to have Hugo respond to Jose's question, Diaz, and then have Emmanuel respond to Alan's question. And I don't know whether you're able to get that in the chat. As you get that, let me just quickly respond to Mike. Your question about planning tool, and I don't know how many people here know about Miradi, open standards, but it's one very useful tool for planning what to do. If you go to work out, there are a lot of technologies that you can pick there and have approaches. So that's one resource. And then the planning tool in open standards that you can easily.
But secondly, I think as water funds mature, TNC may become a partner or partner with the water funds to look for resources to achieve our mission as well as their mission. Sometimes their mission is similar, but not exactly ours, but they can complement. And I think that's a place where we can, that's a role we can play, just becoming a technical partner for the water fund.
Emmanuel, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Thank you, Fred. A great question from Aaron. What kind of challenges we met when you're going through the water fund? Look, there are many, but for the sake of time, I want to focus on two. The first one, as you said, we were trying to get private and public sector together with local community. And as you know, as you try to resolve what problem with the conservation and the water, which normally primarily is the responsibility for the government, you find it's always a challenge to get the public sector leaders on board of such initiatives. So, so what we did, we tried to get to local authority where we want to do conservation and the local government authority, and have them on board and become ambassadors. For example, in our case, we took one governor of the local county who was the chairman of Governor's Council, and since you're doing conservation in his region, and his population benefit from conservation, he was sold already. So he became one of the trustees, and being a heavyweight in government infrastructure in Kenya, he helped to reach out to other high-level authority, and therefore we found that the government of Kenya was open and they support us later. So I think that's approach. You need to get ambassadors. And the second tool we use is to get some heavyweight private sector members who are recognized by the public authorities. In our case, our president is a very strong private sector player in Kenya, just retired as the president of ISO, and he has a high reputation in the country. So having him as a president has helped us to get a buy-in within the public sector. And the second challenge we face, of course, was the speed of fundraising. As Doug said, fundraising, because without money, there is no honey. You can't run such an initiative. So we realized that from the beginning, the fundraising was difficult. Then we start customizing. I mean, when you are taught to approach the banks, the approach different than when you approach manufacturing industry, because you need to find a way you have a message language. So therefore, and the customizing fundraising event, and then having dedicated resources. We had to get a corporate engagement person who has experience in booking appointment, getting high-level people on the table. We meet in the boardroom, we get the attention, and then we take to the field. Because we learned that field visit with the potential donors, with the major impact maker. As soon as they're on the ground, they can see what the farmer doing, they can see the impact on the farmers. Most of the organizations were happy and they're willing to look into the budget to see how they can help us. Therefore, I would say customize fundraising events, dedicate resources, and plan more field visit, because the reality was in the slide of PowerPoint. Thank you.
Thank you very much to all of you. Doug, thank you very much. Doug already gave a few examples of waterfalls that are maturing. I think that also goes to Judy's question, Judy Bond's question. And I also want to thank Judy because she's the focal person for the GEF. And we received a lot of support from GEF in Latin America and Africa. So please, when you get a chance, do let them know that we are thankful. Ladies and gentlemen, I will bring the curtains down here. It's been lovely being together. It's a lovely new year. 2022 is definitely going to be a year like no other. This was the first of many such webinars that we're going to have. I want to thank all of you for staying on and thank many who have already dropped off. Maria, great job. You're doing it very well. Let's see you in 2 months for the next meeting. Everybody have a lovely day. Have a lovely afternoon. And for Salah, who is in South Korea, probably the farthest to the east, I think it's a lovely morning. Enjoy your Wednesday, Salah. Everybody, bye-bye and see you soon.
See you soon. Thank you very much. Thank you to all our presenters as well.